This will be part 5 of reviewing for the midterm test, and what we're going to do in this one is a lot of repeat work from before, so I'm not going to spend as much time talking about it until we get to new material. But this one is actually going to create a ShowPlayers method in the player controller and show a list of all the players and then allow us to go and add a brand new player. So if we take a look back in our main index page that you've been working with, we said if they ever click on this edit word players, which will be underlined, we'll go to the show players method in the players controller. So let's go create a brand new controller called players controller. We'll do empty. We'll say players, click add. It'll create index for us, but I want to go ahead and change that to be show players. The cap was on, sorry about that. Show players, and this is back from our main index view that we had right here, where we said we want to go to the show players controller. And the show players, sorry, the players controller, the show players method. And here's that method. Now, I want to create a brand new list here for all those players, public static list, and the model name is player right there. So we're going to make a list of player objects. We're going to call it LST players equals new list player parenthesis semicolon, and we have an error in there because it's saying I don't know who that class is, so we're going to go ahead and bring in the models class so it understands. There's our public static list for our players. Now right here for the show players, we want to go ahead and pass our list of player objects, and we want to go ahead and create that view, so a strongly typed view. So we'll say add view. We want it to be a list template, and we want to work with the player objects. This will create that view, which will receive an IEnumerable of players, and that's why right here we passed it the list of players. So we get all those player objects, and then instead of the word create new, let's say add a player, and let's call this the add player method. So we need to go create that still in the player controller, and this is all the information for that player. And then down here, let's go ahead and get rid of at least the middle one. We haven't written an edit or delete. We might not even write those. So we want to go ahead and we have this view. If I save that, and I can go ahead and go to the index method, and we can just run this website. And when we go to this website, we'll start at the home page. Actually, in this case, we're starting at show players, so that's not really very good for us, but I can come right here and say home/index, and that will go to our main page. We'll click on players, which goes to the show players method players controller. And here it is, and we don't have anything. Add player, we should get an error because we've never written any of that. So let's come back over to here, just like what we did earlier in the other videos. We go to our player controller, and now we need to create a public action result for add player. We can check again and see, what did we call it? We called it add player right there. That's in our show players method. So add player, and we want to go ahead and say return view. And then the nice thing is what we can do is we can go copy code from our other controllers, like where we had our team controller right here, and here's our add team. where we just said create a team, and here's the post. Let's copy that post method, come back over to our player controller, paste that in. This will be called AddPlayer. This will be a player object. This will be my player. And instead of list team, we'll have list players. This will be my player. And then we'll send it back to index and home. Otherwise, we'll go back to the add screen. Isn't that great? You've written all your code. This will help you get your test done quicker. Just start copying and pasting and changing names. So this should, if we go to this method, display a view. However, right mouse click. We haven't created that view yet. So we're inside the add player, add view. We want it to be a create template using the player model. And here it is. And down here, if we say back to list, we want to send that back to the ShowPlayers method, which is that method right there. So we just made one change is all. Everything else looks okay. Let's go back to our main index and let's run this and see what errors we have. So look how fast this has been for us to create a new view and a new object to store a list of all those player objects. Here we are. There's the list. We don't have any teams or any objects yet. We go to add player and we can start typing things in. Well, now look at this. This is like a scrolling number. And why is that? That's probably because we said that was an int, which we did. That's an int value. And we can say first name, Greg. Well, let's do this. We'll do Spanky, Rascal, position, G for guard, team, UTA, create. Let's go back to players, and there's our record so far. So we know that the ad works. That's great. Now, the one thing about this ad we want to do, though, is first of all, I want to just dynamically create this number. And then I want to have a drop-down list for positions and a drop-down list for teams. Now, we didn't go and create all the position stuff. You can do that. Go work with positions, do a show position method, an add position method, an edit position method. But until we do that, we're just going to create values in the drop-down static-wise. We're going to hard code that. But we do have team objects we could work with. And we could pull that from the model, actually. And I also want to change that. Well, we'll go ahead and leave create. That's fine. Let's close this. Come back over to here. And so I want to go back to this add player. There's my form, right? And in my form, we have our model that we want to work with. And back over here, when we called the method for add player, we didn't worry anything about a model. So maybe we could do something. Maybe we could figure out how to dynamically grab that number. But the big thing that I want to do is I want to work with the drop-down lists for the add form for players. And in order to do that, we're going to work with our view bag. We'll go ahead and use view bag to do that. So how do we do that? So let's go ahead and modify that add player form. So instead of letting them type in the team name, we have a drop-down list that shows it to them. Now remember, we already have a variable that we created in the team controller up here at the top called list team, and that's going to have all the teams that they've been working on. So what we want to do is we want to come to this player controller, and in the view bag, we'll call it viewbag.teams. We want to store some information, and we actually want to store that team object we're working with. But I cannot just type list teams there because it can't see it. But if you remember, where did we create that variable? We created in the team controller, and it's static and public, but the cool thing about static means you don't have to have a team's controller object to work with it because it belongs to this class. That's what static means. It belongs to the class. So I could come back over here to the player controller and type in the name of the class, which is team controller, press a dot, and I have access to that variable that I created. So we're going to store our list team from the team's controller class, because it's static, into the viewbag teams. Now we need to come over to the add player and find the actual player that we're working with, which is right here. This is the team code. We'll leave the label the way it is, but right here, this is the editor. This is the edit for it. And we could take that little edit field out and we can paste in or work with our drop-down list now. So I just pasted some code in. Let me show you what you do. That's our HTML helper, and it says for a drop-down list, go create a drop-down list for the team code. That's in the model. Remember, in our model, each player has a team code, and we want to make a new select list for that drop-down list, and we want to use whatever is in the view bag, which was our list of team objects. We want to store the team code, but we want to display the name. And we have to store the team code because that's what our model says over here for player. Look at player. We're storing our team code for the player. But we want to display the team name. That's what that means. So let me show you one more time. We're going to make a drop-down list for the model team code for this strongly typed view. We want to create a new list object. And for all the list items of that drop-down list, we're going to use the view bag list of team objects. That's going to be the value that we will store if you ever click on an item, and this is the value that you'll display. So let's go ahead and save that. We'll go to our index page and run it, and let's see how it works. So first thing I want to do is I want to go to the team and add some objects there. And remember, this will add objects in that list teams. So we go to teams, add a new team. Code UTA, team name Utah Jazz, add team. Teams, add a new team. DEN, team name Denver Nuggets, add team. Teams, add new team. POR, Portland Trail Blazers, add team. So I now have 3 teams there. Right? 3 teams. Now let's go to the players link. We don't have any players yet. Add a player. Player code 1. First name will be Spanky McDougal. Position, guard, and look what we have, a drop-down list. Now it's not sorted. You can worry about that later. Well, let's say that Spanky McDougal plays for the Nuggets. Create. Players. There's Spanky McDougal. Add a player. Position code 2. Janet Humdinger with a big U there. Sorry. Position forward. Team Trailblazers. Create. And it's showing the team code there. We're not going to worry about showing the description yet. That just shows the team code. But that's showing that the drop-down is actually working. We did have to go add team objects first for this to work, but this is a way we can do the drop-down list. Now, how do we do that if we weren't using like a list of objects? Or could we just do this? could we go to another class? Let's say we have create another controller, add controller, and it'll be an empty controller, and let's call that controller position controller. And in that position controller, we create a public static list of type model position right there, right? So it's going to be position, that's the model. We'll call it list position equals new list position parenthesis parenthesis outside of that sign. And then we have to bring in the class. And it now has the class, and there's our variable that we have that could have positions in there. And how could we actually load that up with position variables? Well, you could go create all the screens to do it like we've done before and add positions, and that would add everything to it. Or maybe we could just do it dynamically somehow. Maybe we could do it right here when we're creating it, because we're making positions objects. So what we can do is right here where we said go create that list, instead of terminating that list, get rid of that semicolon, and back over here we can just paste in new values. So it says create a public static list of type position called list position, and we're going to go create the new list position, and in that constructor we are going to create, curly brace, an array of new objects. What type of objects? Position objects. And the first position object will have a position code of G and a position description of guard, comma, next object. The next object, in fact, let me shrink this down and maybe we can just see it closer in one shot. The next object will be another position object with the position code of F, position description of forward, next object, and a position object of type center, C, with the description of center. So 3 objects, we close off. That now makes a variable called list position with 3 position objects of a guard, forward, and center. Now that we have that value, we can go back to our player controller and create in our view bag positions, and we can assign it the position controller, because remember it's a static variable and it lives with the class, dot list position. So that will now have the list of all those position objects, and we just put it in the view bag. Now we go back to the position view, the ShowPlayers view right here, and not our ShowPlayers view, I'm sorry, our AddPlayer view. And right here, make sure you're editing the right one, right here where we're doing an editor for the position code, instead of having that line, I'm going to wipe that line out. That's the editor for line right above the validation. I'm now going to put a drop-down list again like I did down here for the team, but it's going to be for the view. So I just pasted this in because I typed it somewhere else. HTML helper, let's create a drop-down list for this value in the model, the position code, and let's use a brand new select list using the view bag positions. Remember what we did over here? We added the list position from the positions controller to that view bag positions. So there's our view bag positions for that select list, and we are going to store the position code and we're going to display the position description. So the drop-down list for the position code, creating a brand new select list from the view bag positions, storing the position code, displaying the position description. So let's go ahead and go to our index, let's save it and run it and see what happens. And the first thing we need to do is create team objects. Create our team object, add a new team, team code UTA, Utah Jazz, teams, add a new team, DEN, Denver Nuggets, add team, let's just go to players, add a new player, player code number 1, Spank High, sounds great, Jumanji, spelt wrong. Oh look, guard, forward, or center. We'll say it's a forward for the Nuggets. Create. Players. Add a player. Player number 2. Janet Hummingbird is a guard for the Jazz. Create. Players. And our drop-down list seems to work. Pretty awesome, isn't it? Go ahead and stop that. So let's do one more cool thing. Currently, when I run this program, we'll go ahead and add a team, and then we'll add a player. So I come right here, and I click on, well, let's go to, we started in the wrong controller, so we'll just start at the root controller. We'll add a team, team code UTA, team name Utah Jazz, add team, players, add a player. We have the add code, or the player code right there. Let's say that we really don't want to show that player code. We want to let the system do it, and we want the system to just do an auto-generated number. What we can do is we can come back over to here. This is our add player view, and I can grab that code. That's the code for the player code. That's the label for it, and the editor, and the validation. And I'm just going to wipe that out. Now make sure you leave the class or the validation summary in the class below it. So if I ran this now, just to show you what happens, that's going to disappear. There's no longer going to be the code. You're just going to see the other fields. See, code is gone. So let's go over to our player controller, and this is where we're adding our player. And here's what I want to do. I want to go ahead and go to the player object I'm receiving from the form, from the add player form. And we called it my player, and I want to access the player code attribute, and I want to go to the list of players and grab the count, which the first time count is 0, and I want to add 1 to it. So when we try to add a player, the very first time the player's code is 0, because the count is 0, because there are no players, I'll add 1 to it, and that first player's code will now be 1. The next player's code will be 2, and so on and so on. So let's see if that works. Let's go to the index page. We'll save this. We'll run it. And first thing we'll do is we'll go add some teams. We'll just add 1 team for the sake of time. And add a new team, UTA, Utah Jazz. Add a team. Go to players. Still shows here, which is fine. Add a player. No player code. Donovan Mitchell, he's a guard for the Utah Jazz. Notice we have just 1 team. We have all of our positions. Create. Go back to players. Player 1. There's the code. Add a player. Next player. Let's go back and we'll just use Janet again. Janet Hummingbird And she'll be a center. She'll play for the Jazz also. Players. She's now a 2. So pretty cool that you can do an auto-incremented number just by modifying the player code attribute for the object by grabbing the count of the number of objects in the list, adding one to it, and then storing that object.